Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our great seminar this morning. I'm Lois Perry from the Chapter SCORE Orlando. I have the pleasure of being chapter chair, so I work a lot with Chris as he drives the Central Florida Trade Office here in our area. And we are just delighted to welcome you to our webinar. We are expecting a pretty good crowd this morning. We did this live this spring, but live is getting more difficult to get people into. So we decided to do this one virtually and see how many people we could impact. And it looks like that strategy is working, Chris. So I'm glad to see the folks coming in. Yes, I'm very glad for all of you to be here. We're doing just a little networking in the chat box of where you're from, if your business is up and running, what is your business, and if there's anything in particular you're looking for, one of our experts today should be able to help. So the 30-second commercial from SCORE, if you're not as familiar with us, we are an affiliate of the SBA. We are the business coaches and educators. So if you need general business help, even specific business help, your local SCORE office can help you. I see folks coming in from all over the country right now, from California to New York to North Carolina. So if I'll just had another one, a Long Island coming in with Kenny, that's great. So reach out to your local SCORE office if you're not connected with them. Go to score.org and there's a box, find your local SCORE office, and then fill out, find a mentor, and someone will get back in touch with you. Education is so important to us at SCORE. We want to provide entrepreneurs the opportunity to hear powerhouse speakers like Chris has lined up for you today. I grew up in big business, so our company invested a lot, sending their executive team to the big seminars. That's not happening in the world today. Plus, entrepreneurs don't have the time or they don't have the money. You're too big commodities to manage. So at SCORE, we try to bring those to you. Here in Orlando, we'll do probably just right about 300 seminars in this next year. So network with your local SCORE office so that you know what's up and coming. So with that, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Mr. Chris Leggett, and Chris is going to be manning the Q&A today. So if you have a business question, stick it in Q&A. If you want to continue to chat, we'll do that over in the chat box, and I'll keep up with that one. So Chris, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Lois, for helping to organize this meeting today, which I think is going to be very useful for a lot of entrepreneurs and small business people. We're going to hear today from three great speakers who I'm going to introduce shortly about how to find a manufacturer, both here as well as in Asia, and then also to hear from a contract manufacturer about what they're able to do in order to help you. My name is Chris Leggett. I am the program manager of the Central Florida International Trade Office, where we help introduce local businesses to the opportunities in the global marketplace. We can help businesses that are looking to find out more about importing or exporting. And our main reason for being is to help those businesses that are just getting started to access the resources that are there to help them access knowledge like you're going to be doing today. By offering webinars and other outreach programs, and then to access opportunities when they come to the region. If there's a foreign business delegation coming to the region, we will help facilitate that visit. We're supported in doing this by Orange County and the city of Orlando primarily. We have some funding from Seminole County as well, but we offer help to anyone in the region. And as we can see this morning, we're always happy to help people who are wanting to call in from a little further afield. I also happen to be the chair of the Central North Florida District Export Council, which supports the U.S. Department of Commerce by providing mentoring for businesses that are getting started exporting. As I mentioned, we have three great speakers this morning. Kim Kirkendall has been a bridge for international commerce between the United States and China for 35 years. She began her career in China, moving there in 1986 after graduating from Ohio State University. She lived in China for 5 years, where she ran 2 factories and managed the regional office of a US parent company. Professionally, she spent the first 10 years of her career in operations, manufacturing, and supply chain. The second 10 years began with her becoming a CPA and starting her own business as a consultant, both as an interim executive for some companies and an advisor for others. In addition to the consulting work she leads for International Resource Development, Inc., she is a contracted consultant providing services to companies on behalf of multiple US SBDC offices, as well as the New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. Then we'll hear from Mike Aller, who has served in the White House, taught international economics, and led an energy nonprofit. Now he helps Florida manufacturers strengthen their domestic manufacturing supply chains, as well as improve their resilience to adverse events and identify and capture new opportunities in commercial space, critical infrastructure, national security, and other fast-growing markets. And then we'll close today hearing from Guilford Cantave, who's been involved in manufacturing various types of electronic products for over 15 years. His background in electrical engineering and manufacturing has helped his company to excel in the development of many cost-effective electronic products for his company's clients in several industries over the year. With that, I'm pleased to hand over the speaker to Kim Kirkendall to talk a little bit about managing your supply chain abroad. Kim?
Good morning, everybody. I had myself on mute here so that I wasn't interrupting our hosts. Thank you very much for having me today. Let me start the slideshow here. There's going to be a lot of information, and I'm pretty sure Chris is going to record this and make it available to you afterwards. So anyone that knows me, and Chris knows me really well, Mike and I have spoken together too. I try to give you as much information as I possibly can to help you, succeed. So it's going to be content heavy here, guys. So get ready, take notes, and you can watch the video later. Our focus today is on finding, qualifying, and working with a supplier, right? So before you find a supplier, here's some things I'd like to have you do. Document your product in writing. And you have 2 broad choices in this. One is either an RFQ and the other is a specification sheet. An RFQ is a request for quote, and you typically use that when the manufacturer is already making the product that you want to buy, and you just want to clarify which model, which version, if you might slightly change the color, then you would use an RFQ. That has less detail on it because they're already making the product, you're just buying it from them. A specification sheet has a lot more detail, and that's when you want to design more of the product yourself. So make sure you have either an RFQ or a specification sheet, that you date the version that it is, that you manage and control it so everyone's on the same page. Know what quantities you'll be ordering. So suppliers typically have an MOQ, a minimum order quantity. So they don't want to go into production for 300 pieces or 500 pieces. They don't want to set up their production line for less than 5,000 pieces. So you want to know for your product and that supplier, what is their MOQ and can you meet it or not? Does your production require tooling or some other investment by either you or the supplier? So tooling is basically like a mold that you inject plastic or other materials into. Tooling can also be something that you stamp, but it can be expensive. It can be $1,000, it can be $10,000, it can be $50,000. So is your production going to require that? And do you have the money to pay for that? Or would the supplier, and why, if you were ordering enough quantity? Is your product regulated by the FDA or some other agency when it comes into the US? Typically, the supplier holds the certification for those things. Sometimes as an importer, you also need to have one. So is your supplier certified for the type of product that you want to make? What certifications do you need to have? Labeling is another really important area. What label is required for import requirements, for safety, for the consumer information, So there's a lot of regulations around labeling. How are you going to ship the product? What instructions do you need to give the supplier on packaging or carton markings? You want to make sure you've sorted all of this out, right? Because a good supplier is going to ask you a lot of these questions and you want to be prepared. So starting with the supplier, finding a supplier, there's a lot of ways to search. Mike is going to introduce a phenomenal program the state of Florida has for finding suppliers in Florida. You can find Google search in the US or industry, or oftentimes industry organizations have a way to search manufacturers in those organizations. If you're looking overseas, there's Alibaba or Made in China. So it's a good idea to start with at least 10 potential suppliers and then start narrowing the list down if you can. What do you do once you find a supplier? Trust, but verify. You want to ask questions in a positive, friendly way. You don't want to be hostile or critical or negative because this is a relationship. And you want to find out a little bit about themselves. So be warned, companies often represent themselves online. I call it aspirational lying, right? They're telling you what they wish they were, what they want to be, what's maybe phase 2, right? But they're still in phase 1. So a trading company can present themselves as a manufacturer when actually they're dealing with a manufacturer. Maybe they have some ownership of it, but they're still not the manufacturer. They're just trading. A company can tag hundreds of products in their listings online, but they really only specialize in a small group of that. And the other products are things they like to grow into, or they have partners that make, but it's not necessarily their specialty. So you want to perform basic research on their business. Do they have a website? Are they using a company email address, website, phone number listed? Do they have photos of their factory or products that are online that you can see? If it's a foreign company, are they selling to other clients in the US or Western markets? So you really want to analyze them. And this is just a quick early qualification, right? It's not as deep as we typically like to go once you've selected a supplier and you're ready to order from them. So at that point then, so now we're doing this initial assessment ourselves. It's a good idea to fully qualify a supplier, either visit yourself or have someone else go so that you can eyes on, hands on, boots on the ground in the factory, see what they're doing. In the first contact, start off with a good relationship. You want to be a good partner and work out. There's going to be problems and challenges. There always are, but you want to work with them, to a good solution. So don't go into this with an adversarial mindset. Pricing is not arbitrary. It's based on quantity and customization are the two biggest factors. So if you're ordering a lot more pieces, if you're ordering 100,000 pieces, your price is going to be lower per piece than if you're only ordering 5,000 pieces, because the factory can set up the production once and manufacture for days, and that saves them money. If you're customizing the product and they have to make new molds or they have to design it a little differently or get some other materials, that's going to cost more money too, right? So the lower the quantity, the higher the customization, the higher the price. One of the things we recommend in negotiating price is to barter rather than just try to drive the price down. Why? When you're bartering, you're acknowledging that if I'm making this cup and I ask you to take 10% off, if your margins aren't 40%, which they may not be, maybe your margin's 20% profit, the factory, for them to take 10% off, they might take a little bit of material out or use a cheaper material. So it's better to suggest what you would like them to change to get the price down. Maybe you could say that they could use thinner material on the lid, right? And that would get the price down. You're controlling the changes, so you don't get the product and be surprised that it's not the quality that you wanted it to be or the size that you wanted it to be. Calculate landed cost, which we'll get into later. That's your full cost for bringing the product to your warehouse, and make sure you'll be profitable. And then you're going to need samples, right? Samples to confirm the product meets your requirement. I suggest you pay for samples because the factory doesn't have enough money that they're just giving samples away to everyone. So if you're not paying for them now, you're going to pay for them later because your increased unit price will be higher. You're going to need a purchase order, which is your order to the factory of how much you want to buy. And a good purchase order has some terms and conditions in the back, which I think we talk about in this. You may need a supplier contract. It depends on how long you're going to be working with that supplier and how complicated it is, how much intellectual property you need to maintain. And then you definitely need a quality control system. What are your quality requirements? What do you want them to meet? I may say I want this lid to close fully. I want to be able to tilt it upside down and no water comes out. So those are tests that I might want to have the factory do, right? The factory is going to do their own inspection. Do you get a copy of that report? Do you want a third party to do an inspection? How are you shipping? Do they choose and then you pay them back? Do you pay for it? If you're importing into the US, there's a lot of documents, additional documents from buying domestically, customs brokers and bonds, so it's very different. Here is a landed cost calculation. I taught supply chain in the spring at a university, and so this was from one of the students' assignments. They had to tell me how much it would cost to import a product and if it made sense or not. So they've got their product description, their HS code, which is an international code that identifies the product for all the governments to assign customs duties and valuations. They've got their cost per unit for 500 units. How many cubic meters is 500 units? So how many to calculate how much of it will cost for the container to ship. So they have their shipping per unit price of $1.64. So that's their total price. $8,318 is the cost of the goods and the shipping. They have no duty on this one, so their cost doesn't go up, but there is a 25% tariff. So they have to add that on. They're also going to get some insurance. So their total cost for the shipment is $10,451, when their original cost of just the product was $7,500. So as you can see, the cost can really increase dramatically when you add all these other factors. And you need to understand that to know whether this product works for you or not. So here's a graph that you can go back and look at a little bit more that we borrowed from one of our friends here, ICE, and it talks about the process of placing an order, going through production, bringing it in. This is an import process. Documentation terms, I'm not going to go through these in a lot of detail. These, some of these are domestic and international. Some of these are just international. And so these are important things for you to understand so that when you're having a conversation with your supplier or with the freight forwarder or courier or shipping company, that you understand what each one of these things are. Incoterms, these are also just like our HS or HTS codes, which are the product codes that we all agree around the world to use. Incoterms are payment terms that we agree to use around the world. So on your payment documents, it will say, FOB, free on board, or CIF, cost, insurance, and freight. So these are important to have in your documents because they clarify how the payment is worked, at what point the goods transfer ownership, who's paying insurance. So these are important things for you to have on all of your documents and understand. Harmonized tariff codes, we talked about this a little earlier. This system, and Chris at Central Florida International Trade and SCORE and your SBDCI International Trade offices, Florida manufacturing, if you need to import to manufacture in Florida, there's a lot of people who can help you figure this out, right? And so that can be a little bit complicated. What is my HS code? This is the system. This is the logic behind it. So if we're looking for milled rice, we start with a section code of vegetable products, and then we narrow the second 2 digits, narrow it to cereals, and then to rice, and then to wholly milled rice. So that's how you get to, it's like in a library category system. The first section is all nonfiction, and then it's nonfiction that are biographies, and then it goes like that, right? So here's another example of on the left side, let's say, so that is roasted coffee that's not decaffeinated. So we start off with an 09, which includes coffee, tea, mate, and spices. We get a little narrower to 0901, which is just coffee. 090121 is roasted coffee that's not decaffeinated. And then we go down to codes that the US uses to track trade. So here's some resources in terms of your customs and tax on imports. You have excise fees, potentially duties, bonds. You may need a bond if you're bringing it in for customs yourself. So those are all things you may need. This is where we do an HS code search. You see a number up in the top in the middle, the 86167-900 number. And then that tells us what type of product this is. And on the right side, there's 3 columns, which tell us what the duty rate is. There's a general duty rate, but if the goods are coming from a country the US has a trade agreement with, so for example, you have KR for Korea, South Korea, then you would have no duty, it would be free instead of 2.7%. If they're from one of what I like to call the countries we don't like, which is like North Korea and a few other countries, then it might be 40%. So it's good to understand these. All right, I know I've got a lot here. What documents do you need? Go through this list, go through the video later. Commercial invoice, pro forma invoices before the shipment, shipper's letter of instruction. The packing list goes inside and a copy is outside. It doesn't have your prices, but it has more information on quantity and packaging size and that kind of thing. Freight invoice, cargo receipt, bill of lading, airway bill are what the freight forwarder, what the shipping companies use to keep track of your goods. You may need to have some dangerous good flagging on your cartons, on the outside of your cartons. A freight forwarder is like a travel agent for your shipment. So typically a smaller company, you would use a courier, which is DHL, FedEx, UPS, and they do a lot for you and they just handle the customs and they handle the paperwork. Or you might, if you have a bigger shipment, you might work with a freight forwarder and they manage all the booking. They arrange for the truck from the factory to the port, the ship across the port or within the US, the truck to the rail station maybe, and then it's coming rail across the country and then there's another truck to you. So they fill out all the information and they control the flow of documents. So they pay for those services and charge you for them, right? A 3PL is a third-party logistics company. They're like a freight forwarder, but they add more services, typically warehousing the product. Sometimes they do distribution, picking, packing, and shipping. So they're more full service than the freight forwarder is. Okay, I think I've held fairly close to my time, but it's a lot of information. What I want you to remember the most is garbage in, garbage out. If you're not clear with your supplier, if you're not telling them exactly what you want and when you want it, what you want it to look like, then you're not going to get good product. So you want to be very, very clear about all the information you're sharing with your suppliers.
Thanks so much, Kim. And you did indeed stay on time for this, which is much appreciated. I think another lesson that we can take from Kim's presentation is that while this is all challenging, there are resources available to help you. There are resources at the federal and state levels, at the local level, as well as private sector resources like Kim, who can help you to manage your supply chain, find those reliable suppliers when you're looking abroad. And that's one of the biggest challenges you face. Now, also, it's a challenge to sometimes connect with the right supplier here in the state of Florida. And so we're very fortunate to have Mike Aller here from FloridaMakes to talk a little bit more about the Connex program that FloridaMakes operates to help make that connection with a local supplier. So take it away, Mike.
So I'm Mike Eller. I support the supplier development practice here at FloridaMakes. FloridaMakes is the NIST Manufacturing Extension Partnership Center for the state of Florida. We work with manufacturers of all sizes, from small manufacturers all the way up to some of the largest manufacturers in our state. And my job is to help support and engage manufacturers in being able to understand their supply chain needs, being able to support them in finding new opportunities and connecting to new suppliers. And yeah, unfortunately, my screen share doesn't seem to be working. So Chris, if you can get that going, thank you. Next slide, please. Yeah. So a little bit about FloridaMakes to start with. We are a collection of, or a consortium of manufacturers associations from across the state of Florida. We have about 14 different manufacturers associations that cover the entire state from Pensacola all the way down to Key West. And we are a part of the NIST Manufacturing Extension Partnership Network, which is a group of nonprofit associations that support manufacturers across all 50 states and Puerto Rico. Next slide. Which is connected to the U.S. Department of Commerce. So we have a number of different resources and programs that we provide for manufacturers. We offer technical assistance, we offer assessments, we offer a variety of different resources for manufacturers. And we also offer supply chain services, support services as necessary. You can go, yeah, we also offer workforce training, talent development. I have a number of different resources. We support kind of policy level activity through the Manufacturing Supply Chain Caucus, which is a caucus of the state legislature in Florida. We do business growth technology acceleration. Grow Florida, which is a program that some of you may have heard of that supports second stage entrepreneurs across the state of Florida. And we also have a cybersecurity training resources, and Connex Florida, which is something I'll be talking about quite a lot today. We also offer a whole series of talent development education resources, including apprenticeships and other resources for workforce training. Next slide, please. As you can see, we have service areas across the state. We also have substantial impact over the last 5 years. We have over $3 billion worth of direct impact to manufacturers in terms of the technical assistance services and support we've been able to provide, including helping to create or retain more than 19,000 jobs across the state. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the supply chain disruptions that we've had. Obviously, there's been a lot of different contributing factors to this activity. We have obviously significant delayed shipments and long lead times because of some of the challenges with COVID and some of the ongoing challenges with zero COVID in China and other places. That's led to a difficulty be able to plan because of volatile consumer demand. We had a lot of folks that were going out to restaurants and all of a sudden started staying home and buying things online, and that changed a lot of the dynamics of our delivery systems much faster than those delivery systems are designed to change. And so that created a whole lot of different challenges. We also had a lot of problems in production capacity, both folks having to stay home and just having parts in the wrong parts of the world and not able to find shipping containers and so on to get them to the correct parts of the world. So there's been a lot of different disruptions from a lot of different ways. And that's just underline the need to have, be resilient, to be able to have flexibility, to be able to have different options. And we've been building some resources to be able to enable companies to do that more effectively. Next slide, please. So obviously supply chains involve a lot of different things. Traditionally, supply chains have been primarily about logistics in terms of getting it from point A to point B on time, on budget. And, so looking at least cost and optimized for efficiency just in time. But now supply chain risk management, because of all of these disruptions and all these issues, you have to encompass quality, consistency, technology, workforce, whether someone has the workforce to actually be able to deliver on something, how strong is their relationship with a particular supplier? How important is that relationship relative to your business? Because supply chain cost of goods is oftentimes the largest cost for many of our companies. And, if you don't have good relationships and good suppliers, that can really hurt you very, very badly. And then, ultimately resiliency. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we've been trying to coach companies that we work with is finding ways to be, higher up on what we call the resiliency matrix, which is kind of the ability to recover from negative shocks, and also the opportunity to capitalize on opportunities. So if you're sort of set in your ways and you're not really able to pivot when you need to, that can be very, very detrimental to your business. And likewise, if you're able to be able to have the flexibility to recover and the flexibility to take advantage of new opportunities as they come forward, that this can be a really great opportunity and a really great environment for you. Next slide, please. So we in Florida have been developing, along with our Department of Economic Opportunity, Enterprise Florida, Space Florida, Workforce, Career Source Florida, and many of our other partners, have been developing a series of resources to support companies in Florida, but they're also available to companies outside of Florida if you're interested. And one of those is through a portal we've created called Supply Chain Florida, which offers a lot of different resources on sourcing. Connex is one we'll talk about, but there's a number of others as well. There's a number of resources on, next slide, on supply chain risk management. So you can identify, there's a number of free resources available through the NIST MEP network and other sources on how to do risk management. Information on some of the executive orders and some of the recent legislation, like the CHIPS and Science Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, and the Inflation Reduction Act, all of which have significant implications for supply chain and manufacturing across the country. And also other opportunities like total cost of ownership, which is another aspect of what Kim was talking about earlier with regard to identifying your landed cost and all of those elements. Total cost of ownership is a way and a series of tools to be able to help you do that. Next slide. We also have a number of different training resources on our Connex system and on supply chain issues in general, including a whole set of videos. We have a news feed. We have information on upcoming events. We have information on a wide variety of different resources. Next slide. We also have information on specific opportunities that are companies are out there looking for resources, looking for capabilities. If you are a manufacturer and you're looking to potentially build your business, this is an opportunity to identify, find out what other companies out there across the state and across the country are looking for, because we do get requests through the NIST MEP National Network for companies, on behalf of companies across the country and on behalf of many of our federal agencies. Our federal agencies through Executive Order 14005 on Buy America. Now, if someone is sourcing something, they have to initially go out and look and see that that isn't currently available in the United States first, before they're able to source it from another source outside of the United States. And all of those requests are run through the NIST MEP, NIST Manufacturing Citizenship Partnership resource. And so they get highlighted here on the Supply Chain Florida register and others. Next slide. So what is Connex? Next slide, please. Connex is an online capabilities database and connection platform built for Florida manufacturers, but it also has connections nationally, which we'll talk about. Enables you to do industry-specific sourcing, and it is sponsored. We do sponsor access for Florida manufacturers in the state of Florida through FloridaMakes and our state partners. Next slide, please. It allows for supply chain visibility, so it helps you to visualize your own supplier and customer relationships. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Helps you to identify supply-demand dynamics within our manufacturing ecosystem. Helps you identify specific gaps and alternate suppliers for critical capabilities that you may have. We have strong representation within the system from several industries, including aviation aerospace here on the right, and the medical devices industry on the left. Next slide, please. And we enables you to quickly identify products and services that you're looking to source, identify and evaluate potential alternate suppliers. And we have a number of primes and major programs that are using it to help diversify their supplier base. So a number of larger programs are looking to find smaller suppliers, especially smaller suppliers that are women-owned, veteran-owned, minority-owned, hubs-owned businesses. And so it's a great opportunity for companies that are in those categories to highlight their services and be able to be found. Next slide, please. It also enables you to just find local suppliers, local manufacturers to us. So all these folks are Florida-based manufacturers in robotics, in marine, in aviation, in consumer products, in printed circuit boards, a whole lot of others. And so, yeah, there's a lot of great capabilities, and many folks just don't know that these capabilities exist, that these folks are out there, and so we want to make sure that we're highlighting our the great resources that we have and are connecting folks together with each other. Next slide, please. So what are sort of things you can use Connex to search for, or you can search by certifications, so ISO or ITAR. You can search by specific equipment, so a CNC capability or non-destructive evaluation capability, by geographic regions, so you can look in specific parts of the state. You can look by specific metro areas if you're interested, or you can look across specific regions. You can limit things by distance. Industry sectors, of course, NAICS codes, North American Industrial Classification codes, specific product services, small business designations, as I talked about. There's been a lot of different activity, especially around the pandemic, but we've had a lot of different companies with manufacturing services or specific resources. We were just sourcing seatbelt buckles the other day, and got a company in South Florida was looking for seatbelt buckles, and we found a company in Tampa that could make them for them. So that happens every day, all day long. Next slide, please. It also has a great bulletin board feature, which we call the Exchange Center, which enables companies to highlight specific resources. So you can either go in and search for a specific capability, or if there's something specific that you need or that you're looking for, you can put forward basically a bulletin board post, Exchange Center post, and put that out to the community. And that will enable companies that are relevant to those capabilities to be notified that there's a request out there, be able to come back in and respond to those. And likewise, if you are a manufacturer, you're interested in being a part of this, you can sign up for the system and sign up for notifications, so that if someone puts out a post or a need that's related to what you can provide, that you will be notified by that via email, can go back into the system and be able to see what the specific details are, whether you actually align with that or not. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, Connex Florida is sponsored access for all manufacturers within the state of Florida. It is open to manufacturers only at this point, but we can offer you state access for free. There is also a connected platform called Connex Marketplace, which enables you to look nationally. There are about 9,000 manufacturers listed across the state of Florida at this point. There are about 140,000 listed nationally. There is an annual subscription fee associated with the national access, but we can, because this is October and it's manufacturing month, there is a 30-day free trial available for the national access. And if you're interested in that, you can reach out to me separately and be happy to get you information about that. Next slide, please. I talked about earlier, one of the aspects of Connex, which is unique and very beneficial, is that it also enables you to do analysis and visualization of your own company's individual supply chain. So you can put information in there about companies that are your own suppliers, and what do they supply you what they currently supply you. It'll provide you visualization on a variety of different criteria, provide you some feedback on maybe some of the gaps or vulnerabilities in your supply chain. Next slide. And enable you to highlight prospective alternates. So you can click there. There's a little find alternate button, as you can see down there. This is a screenshot, of course, so it's not active through this, but there is functionality to be able to identify and find alternates for prospective capabilities, especially those that you may have, single source suppliers, or if you're having an issue with a particular supplier, you can use this function to try and find some alternates. And again, one aspect of this is that this aspect of the functionality is confidential to individual companies. So this is only available to you as a manufacturer that has access to the system. You set this up for your own benefit and for benefit of your own team. Next slide, please. You can also identify alternate capabilities nationwide. So you can look through Connex Marketplace. You can look across the country. Next slide, please. And you can also be highlighted. If you have national access, you also have the ability to have your profile highlighted nationally as well. Next slide. This is a little screenshot of the access page. Some basic information. You can hit the little button to create an account if you don't already, and we can go through that process. Next slide. We also offer and host a number of different supplier engagement events across the state. So many of these are with larger primes, especially in the aviation, aerospace, defense industry. We are doing working on a couple in the medical industry as well. But if you're interested in those, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd be happy to get you engaged with the next round that's coming up. Next slide, please. And that's what I have at this point. We can probably move over to Guilford, and I can answer questions with the group.
Thanks so much, Mike.
All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Guilford Cantave, the founder and CEO of Fermitron Inc. And my purpose here today is to discuss how we as a Florida contract manufacturer helps entrepreneurs with realizing their product ideas. All right, Chris gave a great intro earlier, so we'll just skip over this page here. And just brief history of our company. We were founded in 2010 under the name of GLC Electronics Design. But since then, in 2012, we incorporated so we can create a platform that can scale over time as we grow. And our mission is to help companies, individuals, and government entities realize electronic products that need to be manufactured and also have engineering requirements as well. So to answer the question today, how does Fermitron help entrepreneurs? There are several areas where we assist with realizing a concept and transitioning that into manufacturing. There are a lot of companies either in the startup stage or in the growth stage that have areas of expertise in particular areas, and they're bringing a product to market that's sometimes or most times in the umbrella of their capabilities. For those who do not have engineering resources to help realize their idea and get that manufactured, Fermitron does provide engineering services in the area of electrical engineering and computer engineering as well. We also help with concept prototyping. Sometimes entrepreneurs are looking for tangibles that they can bring with them to showcase to potential investors or other parties that are interested in helping them scale and to get their product to manufacturing. So that's something we do assist some of our clients with. Some clients already have a prototype. They do already have some technical capabilities in the areas of electrical engineering, electronics engineering. So they might have already prototyped something, and they're just looking for an additional eye on their design to see if this is something that can be manufactured. Is it manufacturable, but also cost effective? To touch on what Kim had mentioned earlier, it's critical to work with your manufacturers, whether they're domestic or they're overseas, by providing the right documentation to make sure what gets manufactured is what you want manufactured and not some variation of it. So a lot of times manufacturers will design what you give them as far as documentation, so far as it's within their manufacturing capabilities. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be, how do you say, manufactured as cost effective as possible. So we help our clients with, identifying areas of that need improvement to cost down. If you can build your circuit or your electronic product a certain way that can reduce the cost, that's what we help to exploit. So we also make connections to other companies. It's not really helpful to some companies to have just the electronic circuit board for their product and nothing else around it. There are many different types of manufacturing. Our expertise is in the manufacturing of electronics, but you also need things such as enclosures for your electronics. So we don't just walk around with circuit boards for our cell phones. They have really nice enclosures that require mechanical engineering and machining and other types of manufacturing for metals and plastics. But in less of a manufacturing capacity, there's also software requirements that your products may have, or your product may connect to an application that's on a phone or other smart device. So we help to connect the companies or individuals we work with others that are experts in machining, mechanical engineering, software development, app development, things of that nature. All of these things overall make up products that are generally used in the commercial domain and the consumer domain today. So it's not just electronics alone. So we do work with and network with other companies to fulfill those other needs. Another thing that Kim had touched on earlier was regulatory compliance certification. Most people are aware, but some are not, that you can't just manufacture a product, for instance, and bring it to market in the United States or some of the other countries around the world. So in our domain, in the electronics domain, for instance, if your product that you're developing and you're looking to take to market has certain characteristics of it that require UL certification, you cannot just sell your product. Even if you manufacture it, you cannot sell your product without it being, passing through the rigors of the UL compliance process. So there's another regulatory body, FCC. If your device connects to a smart device with Bluetooth or any other radio technology such as Wi-Fi, you cannot just mass produce these devices without having gone through the FCC certification process. Once those processes are done, you either have a UL identification number that is attached to your product, or in regards to FCC, you'd be issued a FCC ID number that would need to be stamped or placed or affixed onto your product. So we do assist companies with getting their products ready for those type of certifications, and also helping to work with the actual regulatory bodies to get those type of services done. Mike had touched upon a certain instance where we had supply chain disruptions around the world, and that has affected companies small and large, and individuals looking to bring products to market by impeding on their abilities to manufacture the product because some of the parts that make it up might be on back order. So we've helped clients in many different ways where they might already have something in production and their supply chain have been disrupted, where they may have parts that have lead times of 50 weeks or 90 weeks, and that they just can't afford as a business or a startup to have not have the ability to produce for that period of time. So we've assisted by finding either replacement components that can help shorten that lead time, or to even in some cases redesign parts of their circuits with parts that are available now in quantity, so that they're, instead of being down for 90+ weeks, their production might be down for 4 weeks or 5 weeks. So our core competencies, I'll just touch on these real quick. So we do offer design services in electronics engineering and embedded software. And those are two critical pieces for any type of electronic product these days. We also have the prototyping services, where we in-house not just design, but we also build circuit boards, subsystems, and we can also test those with our clients. And also, we also do the production services as well. So we do specialize in low and medium volume type of production as it pertains to electronics. And that's for circuit board assembly, cable assembly, and box builds. And we are running short on time, so I'll just go through these real quick. These are for those who are familiar with what they're looking for in the areas of printed circuit board design and layout. In short, we can help cover the type of electronics that one would expect in today's cutting edge electronics. And as far as our engineering services are concerned, we do design all types of printed circuit boards to fulfill the requirements of many type of different electronic products that entrepreneurs may be looking to bring to market. And then we also do the manufacturing of these things, not just the prototyping or the engineering behind them. So this is the printed circuit board assembly. The wiring harnesses, those are required for products that have multiple circuit boards, and they need to be interconnected inside of the product. And then box build is simply taking the electronics and putting them and securing them inside of their enclosures. Certifications, Kim touched on that earlier. It's important to ask companies what type of quality management systems they have to ensure the quality and the repeatability of a quality product while it's in production. We're service disabled veteran-owned business, and we're also minority-owned business as well. And just basic contact information if anybody has any questions. And that concludes my portion. I think we still have a few minutes. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Guilford. And we have some questions that have come in here. One I see is just been answered, but I'll put one to you, Guilford, that we got from Roseda, that she's looking for a DFM for cosmetic packaging idea. Do you also offer industrial design?
We don't in particular. So we have a very specific skill set, and that's in the electronics, but we do partner with other companies that have expertise in those areas. So yes, we do partner with companies that work in the areas of mechanical engineering and industrial design, but not us ourselves.
And is that something you'd be able to help with, Mike at FloridaMakes, to help connect them to someone who could do industrial design for them?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, we do also offer, yes, if folks have industrial design needs, and it's, yeah. I mean, obviously Guilford has a great outfit and they have some amazing capabilities, but yeah, depending on what you're specifically looking for, happy to have a conversation.
We also got a question, Mike, from Nancy about how to find similar resources like FloridaMakes and I assume Connex in other US states. How would they make those connections?
Yes, so there is a, it's called the NIST Manufacturing Extension Partnership National Network. There are 50 other centers like FloridaMakes in the other 49 states and Puerto Rico. You can go to, I put this, I believe, in the answer, but I can put it in the chat too. It's nist.gov/MEP/centers. And it will provide you, there's a listing there of all the different centers across the United States. So there should be one for your specific state. If you have any questions, need any specific more information, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to connect you directly to the folks at that center as well. No problem.
Of course, you might want to consider moving production to the great state of Florida, because we've got so many amazing manufacturers here and service providers. On a similar note, I see a lot of the questions have been answered directly, but Dana Johnson was asking or has told us that she's an owner of a bath, body, and beauty company in Jacksonville and would like to scale her business by employing a manufacturer to mass produce her products. She's seeking with a connection with a manufacturer here in the state of Florida, and any input or advice we might have would be appreciated. Is that something?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there are a number of bath and cosmetics manufacturers in Florida, quite a number of small boutique shops, and then there are a few really large ones. But yes, be happy to have a conversation with her and or him and figure out what their specific needs are and help them move forward, whether it's in Florida or whether it's somewhere else in the country. Yeah, just help you find something locally. So be great.
Yeah, and we've put all the speakers' contact information in the chat box, so you can get that there as well. When we send around copies of the presentations, the contact information will be included with that as well. If you want to reach out to any of the experts we have, are we able to run over a little bit, Lois? Or
Yes.
Okay, as I want to make sure we get to all the questions.
Yeah, there's great questions in there. Yeah.
Andre Gilbert has asked about starting a clothing brand, and they're looking for manufacturers or resources to help set up their own manufacturing. Who's it best to connect with? I think it's probably a question for both Kim and Mike. So maybe we'll go to Kim first in terms of how do you find a foreign manufacturer for your clothing?
Thanks. Yeah, a lot of clothing today there's very difficult to find clothing manufacturers in the US, possible but difficult, especially that produce clothing for other companies that aren't just making it for themselves. So that's a difference when you're looking at manufacturing, is there may be 500 factories making a particular product in the United States, but 490 of them make it for themselves and not for their own brand, and not necessarily for someone else's brand or design. So in clothing, it's likely that you go overseas, and China even doesn't make a lot of the clothing anymore. A lot of it comes from Bangladesh, India, other countries in Southeast Asia. So that's kind of the answer there. And you would need to go, there's various search engines that you can find, clothing manufacturers in those countries. So you could look at those search engines. You could talk to someone like myself or someone who does sourcing or supply chain consulting internationally. Mike, do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kim is absolutely right. Yeah, a lot of manufacturers locally make things for their own brands. There are a few that will do production on spec for others. But that is typically some of the higher end stuff. So there's so your unit costs are going to be a bit higher depending on what you're looking to do. And yes, so there, she's absolutely right that in terms of clothing, particularly, production locally can be hard depending on specifically what you're looking to do. And then that, yes, that it isn't necessarily China that's the primary source overseas. There's quite a bit in other Asian countries. There's even there's some more in South America as well, in certain places. Latin America. In terms of just generally sourcing, oftentimes I think a lot of folks made in America is great, and it's really something that we want to support, but the production costs in the United States can be substantially higher, and you may have to build that into your business model if you really want to do that. In some cases that cost factor may be 4 times, in some cases it may be 10 times, and it may be just a function of, and in some cases it may be quite similar. It really depends on the product, what you're trying to do. If you're doing something that can be additively manufactured, oftentimes actually that can be more price competitive than something that is not, using the latest techniques. But there's so many different sort of facets to this, and how you go about, understanding what are the production processes that are necessary, who can do those and under what parameters. It's really, worth an initial conversation, and we have a series of business advisors across the state whose job it is to help companies work through these issues and understand.
And I would add quickly to Mike's point that, so I help New Zealand companies that are coming into North America. And sometimes that's finding a manufacturer here if they can. And I have had success reaching out to companies that are manufacturing for themselves and saying, would you be interested if we make it easy for you? We're not going to ask you to change a bunch of things. We'll make sure the order quantity is large enough, that you set up the machine for our client. And I just got a message about 6 months later for a niche company, New Zealand company, that the introduction that we made for them, the US factory that we found, they were piloting a new product together and had a contract with Walmart. So sometimes you can, and it's not easy. I've been doing this my whole life, and it wasn't easy for me to find a factory in the US, to reach out, find the right person to talk to, convince them it wasn't a crazy idea, start the conversation. But it was so fabulous to get that message 6 months later that this US manufacturer and this New Zealand company have a great partnership, and they're going to be in Walmart. So it can happen sometimes, so it may be worth, the time and effort for you to find that. Okay, Chris, sorry. Any more questions?
I want to go back to one that you actually answered, Kim, in the chat, but I want to give some others an opportunity. Maybe you can say it so that way when this is recorded, for those who are just watching on YouTube, they can see the answer. And that came from, I'm not sure if it's Siandra or Chandra, but she asked, is there a checklist that helps us vet these suppliers? Is there a site they are registered with to show that they're legit? So maybe we'll start off with Guilford as to how do you, if somebody's coming to you wanting to find a manufacturer, what are some of the things that you do in order to make them comfortable with you, and that they know they're getting a legitimate, reliable supplier? And then we'll go to Mike and Kim to add to that.
Certainly. So we generally start with the questions and try to figure out exactly what they're looking for, because there's several type of manufacturers that specialize in certain areas. So once we have a full understanding of what they're looking for, and maybe they might not be a fit to work with us, that will give us the questions and answers we get from them will give us enough information and enough confidence to refer them to a company that does specialize in the area that they may be looking for in terms of manufacturing.
Excellent. Mike or Kim?
Mike, did you want to chime in?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, well, actually, Kim, you can go first and I'll go. That's fine.
I had answered in the chat just for the video that the short answer of, is there a checklist to qualify suppliers, or is there one website where they're registered? The short answer is no. We wish, right? And even large companies, I mean, I even have $3 billion companies that come to me and say, you know, is there a checklist or some way we can qualify distributors for export overseas or suppliers? And really, these are the kind of things that companies or individuals develop themselves and that they've used over years, or that maybe, and they're definitely maybe specific to a particular product or industry. So there may be certain types of questions you ask if you're making clothing versus if you're making computers. You know, you're going to have different questions that you ask. So it's not that simple. You can crowdsource, huge fan of crowdsourcing. You can crowdsource, you can talk to Mike, you can talk to Guilford, Chris, you know, Lois, myself. You can pull a list together of what works for you and how you want to do that. But I think the important thing is to understand that it's an ongoing, right? You start off pre-qualifying them, and then as you start getting information from them, you're aware of any red flags that come up and how they're answering you or not answering you. As you start manufacturing, you're keeping your eyes on, are they capable? Are they being a good partner? Are they able to answer questions, you know, the way that they should be? So it's an ongoing process. It's not I'm going to qualify them and then I know 100% they're good and I don't need to worry about it later. You have to keep your eye on, you know, are they showing that they're reliable? Do they really understand the product that they're manufacturing? You know, those kind of things. Do you want to add anything, Mike? Or
Yeah, so I mean, you're absolutely right. There isn't any one definitive answer, and part of it is because there's so much complexity in terms of what are the different types of things that you could be sourcing for. But there are resources that are out there. We have some resources. They're templates. They're not the end all be all in every case. There are training resources that are out there. A couple of our fellow MEP centers, Pennsylvania and Michigan, have training courses that help companies sort of walk through the process of vetting and vetting suppliers and doing supply chain risk management implementation for their own activities. And we'd be happy to provide you information about that. We do referrals to them all the time and are great programs. Yes, there are a number of other, there's another question that's in the chat that I guess I'll get to. I'll just pivot to that too. I mean, there are a lot of benefits for sourcing locally too. You know your suppliers, you can go visit them. You oftentimes build relationships, and you can have flexibility that you can't have if you're sourcing from overseas or having to deal with shipping, 8,000 miles, via large container shipment. So there's a lot of different aspects of this that all sort of go into the gumbo, so to speak, to be able to identify what's the best process for you and your business and what you want to be doing going forward.
I might just add as well that you might want to consider finding a consultant who is able to help you with this. I mean, that is what people like Kimberly can do. And that's to help you with your vetting process, because particularly when it's abroad, I mean, Mike has just made an excellent point in terms of when you've got a manufacturer here in Florida, or really anywhere in the United States, if you want to, you can go there relatively easily and check them out. When you're going to China, using that as an example, that's a big investment to go all the way over there. You're probably, unless you're experienced already, not going to know exactly what to be looking for. You won't know the language, so you're going to always having to be communicating through someone else, and having a consultant who has the network already there, knows the market, can speak the language, can actually understand what they're saying and reading between the lines, because one of the big things in working in another country is you can't assume that everything is the same as here, and yes might not actually mean yes. And so they're able to help you with that process. And so, yes, it's another investment you have to make in order to better manage your supply chain. But you'll probably end up saving more than it costs you at the end of the day, if only in peace of mind, knowing that you're not going to have to be, just trying to hope that you'll get what you want. You're going to have somebody who's actually knows what they're doing, working on your behalf. That's alone a great value. But then by helping actually get a good manufacturer, you're not going to waste your tight funds on getting a production line done for you and then end up having to trash it because it doesn't meet your requirements, and it's too hard to go after the supplier for a refund on something like that. I see Kim is answering one question here. Andre has asked whether Mike would be the person to talk to about setting up their own clothing manufacturing for their clothing brand.
Well, I certainly could, like I mentioned, provide you some references to folks that probably would be even better to talk to than me. I might be a place to start, but certainly, depending on what you're looking for, there are a number of folks out there that have a lot of experience in the apparel industry, in the clothing industry, and would be probably much, you get what you pay for, but I would highly recommend that you consider talking to some folks that have had a lot of experience in that specific industry. Be happy to give you some names to start with.
We have one last question coming from Fantacomp, and I like how ambitious you are. I would like to start a company competing with Nike and Jordan. It's hard finding good quality or replicas. Is this even a good idea? I think the first answer to that probably is when you're talking about replicas, I'm assuming you're not looking at violating any intellectual property. And if you want to learn more about intellectual property, I actually have an in-person event that we're doing with the Department of Commerce on November 17th. That's going to be on how to protect your intellectual property. We've got experts coming in from Washington, D.C. We'll have the FBI, Customs and Border Protection, the Patent Office are all going to be here. You'll have a chance to speak with them a little bit about how to protect your intellectual property. But I'll throw it open to anyone who wants to talk about how to set up your own shoe manufacturing.
Chris, I'll jump in, not on how to set up the shoe factoring, but I'm a marketer. And when you go in against these huge international brands, the headwinds are going to be very intense. Now, that's not to say that you can't do it, but those guys spend millions and millions of dollars every month on advertising. And as an entrepreneur starting out, that's very difficult to compete with. So your business plan needs to be very crisp on how you're going to do that. And like Chris says, make sure that you're not violating any trademarks or you'll lose the trust of their consumers immediately. But I would tread with caution on that. So interesting to see what the international folks think about that.
I see Kim's.
I would add, I'm sorry, I was answering a question.
Yeah.
In general, just on intellectual property, because there's a few questions like circulating right now on intellectual property. You want to hit it on multiple fronts, right? And one of them is the agreements that you have in place with your suppliers or your distributors, both. And those agreements are non-disclosure, non-compete, ownership of intellectual property. They can all be in one contract. You can have 2 or 3 agreements, non-disclosure and a supplier contract that talks about intellectual property. So those are important. But also there are ways to, so let's say, for example, that I'm making a electronic product that has a proprietary software. I might have the factory make the product, but I download the software when it gets here, so they don't have it. Or I have a product that's made up of 2 or 3 different components, and one of them is really my secret sauce. So I might make that little component myself, or have it made in another country, not in China, have it made in the US, or have it made, in Thailand or whatever, and then shipped and assembled by a different manufacturer, so that nobody has all of the details about how to make my product, but I'm breaking them up and splitting them up between different factories. That's a practical way of making it more difficult. But I always tell people there's generally 2 metrics that I can tell you whether you're going to get knocked off or not. One of them is, how big is your market? If your product has the capability of being a $500 million part product, and it's only going to cost me $500,000 to copy you, to figure out the engineering of copying you, then it's worth my while, right? If it's a $3 million niche product and it's going to cost me $500,000 to copy you, I'm not going to, because it's not worth it to me, right? That's one reason. So what does that say about your product? The second one is, how hard is it? If I have to just reverse engineer the materials that are in your product, if you have some special mixture of steel and alloy and metals that I can figure out, and then I've got your secret sauce, that makes you more likely to be knocked off. But if what makes your product secret is how you are manufacturing it, if there's a way that you have to first heat the material, and then you have to cool it, and then you have to paint it with something for 24 hours, and then you have to heat it again, now it's very hard for anybody to copy you, right? So the 2 drivers are, is it worth my while to do it? Is the market big enough and the cost to go in small enough? And how hard is it to figure out what your secret sauce is? If it's process driven secret, it's hard for me to figure out. If it's materials driven, it's usually easy. So those are my risk factors that when I assess how hard, how worried a company should be about theft of their product design. Anyone else?
Real quick, to add what you said, Kim, sometimes we've actually seen the case where instead of a potential a client that wants to work with us sending us the manufacturing file outputs for their designs for us to evaluate and manufacture, they actually send their design files themselves. So those are 2 different things. Once your design has been completed, your design package, whatever's being used to design your product, outputs manufacturing files. The manufacturing files are what you send out for quotation. You never send out your actual design files themselves to manufacturers that you're just prospecting. And that also goes to the software.
That's great advice.
Yes, absolutely. That's great advice. Yes.
You don't send out the source code. You only send out the executable file. The executable file can still be reverse engineered, like Kim said, depending on how big the market and how what type of challenge is posed to the reverse engineering. It is another layer, another hurdle by just using executable files. And then there are other technologies. If you have a very cost-sensitive device, it has to be manufactured overseas. There are provisions where the software that gets programmed into the electronics can be sent to the factory on a special piece of hardware that's encrypted. And if you need 5,000 units manufactured, you remote into that device and allow for it to program up to 5,000 devices. And once that happens, the device turns off. So it can't be used to program knockoff devices that actually compete with your device.
This is why we love engineers. and a lot of the advice you just heard is phenomenal, but it's also the difference between having an R&D engineer, research and development engineer, who doesn't understand manufacturing, which that's not Guilford, he understands both, If you have just an R&D engineer, they may not give you the best advice because they don't realize how you can control that information as it goes into manufacturing. And what he's telling you is so important. And it comes from someone with experience who understands both the design and the manufacturing side. So just be aware of that also. It can be two different skill sets, and some people have one or the other, and some people have both.
Well, thanks, everyone. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I see there's one last question from Fanta about what's one of the best businesses to own right now. And I think that's probably something you might want to explore with SCORE maybe later on, but it's really a tough one for us to answer because that's in many ways a personal decision as to whether a business is going to be a good one. But there's lots of counselors here at the National Entrepreneur Center between SCORE and the 16 other in-person partners we have at the National Entrepreneur Center who can help answer some questions about some of the businesses that you might want to have. With that, I'd like to thank Mike, Kim, and Guilford for having participated as speakers today. And I'll leave the closing words to our good friend Lois. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and tremendous information, folks. And I would like to ask a give back from you. Entrepreneurs like to hear from other entrepreneurs. We can go out and say, hey, our classes rate 9.7 out of 10, big deal. An entrepreneur wants to hear your words. If you think this webinar helped you today, would you do a screenshot of that QR code? Just put a few words in, be sure and mention the manufacturing webinar and any of the speakers' names that you felt particularly brought it home for you. But you're of course helping SCORE, but more importantly, you're helping other entrepreneurs because end of the day, we're all in this together. And with that, I'm going to close and keep watching your emails. We have lots of fun stuff going on at SCORE Orlando. Follow the Central Florida Trade Office webpage and Chris's email list for everything that's going on. But I hope to see some of you at the knockoff seminar that Chris was talking about, where we'll meet the FBI agents and all those official folks as they talk to us about that product. But you guys have a great rest of your week and a happy holiday season coming up, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks, folks.